The days were not measured by hope, nor by ambition, but by the endless rhythm of survival. I awoke each morning beneath the same rusted ceiling, a metal shell patched and scarred by centuries of neglect. The air tasted of iron and dust, and every breath rasped against lungs long accustomed to the choking atmosphere of the Imperium's forgotten worlds. There was no dawn here, only the slow flicker of failing lumen strips, their pale light stuttering like dying stars. I was not a soldier, nor a priest, nor one of the favored born to command. I was a laborer, a fragile human body pressed against the machinery of a decaying empire. Each day I toiled until my hands cracked, blood mingling with oil and grime. The machines I served were older than my bloodline, relics of a past no one remembered, their function barely understood, their purpose long since reduced to the endless grind of necessity. To stop working was to starve, to complain was to vanish. We lived in silence, a silence filled with the weight of despair. Words carried danger, questions carried death. The overseers wore the sigil of the Aquila, yet they were not protectors. They were reminders that we were nothing but fuel, nothing but the fragile meat that kept the Imperium's corpse alive for one more day. To them, we were already dead. At night, I lay on my cot of cold steel, staring at shadows that twisted across the ceiling. My dreams, when they came, were not of freedom or salvation. They were fragments of things lost, faces blurred by time, the sound of laughter I no longer recognized, the warmth of sunlight I had not felt since childhood. Dreams were dangerous, for they reminded me that life had once held meaning, and meaning was a heresy in a place where only obedience endured. There were whispers, of course. There are always whispers in the dark. Tales of planets where people lived without chains, where rulers promised harmony instead of cruelty. I did not believe them. Hope was a toxin, and those who drank of it were swiftly consumed. Better to endure, better to survive, better to silence the treacherous voice within that dared to say there must be more. Still, when I looked at the faces of my fellow workers, hollow-eyed and skeletal, I wondered how long this world would hold us. Every day, another was carried away, broken by the labor or swallowed by the overseer's wrath. The machinery did not pause for grief. The work did not bend for mourning. One more body gone, one more soul forgotten, and still the gears turned. That was my life, a cycle of toil, silence, and fading memory. Portrait of the everyday, painted in ash and blood. And yet, beneath the crushing weight of obedience, something restless stirred. A question unspoken, fragile, and forbidden. What if the whispers were true? It began, as many horrors do, without warning. A message appeared where no message should ever be, burned into the lumen screens that lined the factory walls. For a moment, the entire floor went silent, the grinding of machines muffled by awe and unease. The overseers stiffened, eyes narrowing as though the very air had turned treacherous. The words were simple. Too simple. For the greater good. No seal of the Aquila. No mark of the Imperium. Just those 4 words glowing faintly against the grime-streaked metal, pulsing as if alive. And then, just as suddenly, the message vanished. The lumen screens flickered, and the endless litany of quotas and work schedules returned, as though nothing had happened. But we had all seen it. I felt my stomach tighten, a sickness that had nothing to do with hunger. The phrase echoed in my mind like a forbidden hymn. It was not imperial. I had never heard the ecclesiarchy speak of good, only of duty, of sacrifice, of endless struggle. The Imperium offered no comfort, only survival beneath its shadow. Yet these words, alien in their simplicity, offered something the Aquila never had, a promise. Whispers erupted in the silence, quickly hushed by the bark of the overseers. We bent our heads back to our tasks, hands trembling against the cold metal. But the words lingered, etched behind our eyes. For the greater good. A phrase that did not belong to this place, that could not belong to the Imperium. It was something else, something from beyond the stars. That night, in the suffocating dark of my quarters, I dreamed of voices I had never heard. Calm voices, gentle voices. They spoke of harmony, of unity, of an end to the endless suffering that had defined every breath of my life. And in those voices was something far more dangerous than cruelty. There was hope. I awoke gasping, sweat chilling my skin. My hands trembled as though the dream itself had marked me. To dream of hope was one thing. To hear its language whispered into my mind, that was heresy of the highest order. If the overseers knew, I would not see another dawn, and yet I could not silence it. The message had found me, whether by chance or by design. As I returned to the factory floor, I felt eyes upon me. Not the overseers, not the hollow stares of my fellow laborers, but something unseen, watching, measuring, waiting. By the third day, another message came. This time, not to all, only to me. A strip of faded parchment left where no one else should have dared to place it. Beneath the cot where I slept, wrapped tight in cloth that smelled faintly of ash and oil. My heart pounded as I unrolled it, the crude ink smearing against my fingers. The words were clumsy, hurried, but unmistakable. You are chosen. Meet at the outer gates. Do not speak. Do not fear. I froze, reading the message again and again, each word heavier than the last. Chosen for what? Liberation? Damnation? It could be a trick of the Inquisition, a trap designed to root out the treacherous. It could be the whispers of chaos wearing the mask of salvation. Or perhaps it was something stranger still, the hand of those I had only heard in rumors, the alien rulers who spoke of the greater good. I wanted to burn the parchment, to erase the words before they consumed me. But I could not. My hands shook, but they did not obey. The message had planted itself in me, a seed of unease growing with every passing hour. All day I could not work. The machine screamed for attention, but my mind was elsewhere, circling the same thought again and again. Meet at the gates. Was it madness to consider? Was it suicide to ignore? As the shift ended, and the factory floor emptied into the endless dark of the settlement, I walked home with the message hidden close to my chest. My eyes scanned every shadow, every face, wondering who else might carry the same summons. None spoke, yet silence itself felt alive, charged with the weight of secrets. That night I did not sleep. I lay upon the cot, staring into the blackness, listening to the faint hum of machines beyond the walls. The message whispered again and again in my mind, louder than my own heartbeat. You are chosen. I did not know if it was salvation or ruin, but in the grim silence of my existence, it was the first time in years that I felt something stir within me. Not joy, not courage, but the trembling anticipation of standing on the edge of a great abyss, and knowing perhaps that I would step forward. I carried the message with me as though it were a brand seared into my flesh. It weighed more than parchment, more than ink. It was a burden that pressed against my ribs with every breath, a secret too heavy to bear. The words echoed without mercy. You are chosen. They refused to leave me, circling endlessly in my thoughts, hollowing out the fragile silence that once shielded me from despair. Yet the more I thought, the more the fear grew. I began to wonder if I had already betrayed myself simply by reading it. Perhaps there were eyes in the walls, vox recorders in the ceilings, overseers trained to hear the tremor of guilt in a man's voice. The Imperium did not forgive. To harbor suspicion was enough to condemn. To imagine escape was already treason. Every glance became a threat. Every whisper seemed a snare. My fellow workers, hollow-eyed like myself, trudged through the days in silence. But I began to imagine them watching me from the corner of their vision. Did they know? Had they received the same summons? Or was I alone in this madness, the chosen prey of some cruel test? The overseers, too, seemed different, though perhaps it was only my poisoned mind. Their gaze lingered longer than before. Their boots echoed sharper against the steel floors. A single word from them, a single gesture, and I would be gone, dragged into some hidden chamber to vanish as countless others had. I worked with trembling hands, forcing myself into silence, praying the machines would mask my unease. But the doubts did not relent. At night, I lay on my cot, the message hidden beneath the thin mattress, and I imagined what fate awaited me at the gates. Salvation, perhaps, but more likely death. The Imperium had tricks within tricks, and I had heard whispers of the Inquisition's cruel games. They dangled false promises before the desperate, only to tear them down, to expose them as heretics before the Emperor's gaze. Was that what this was? Had I already been condemned the moment I dared to dream of another life? And yet, when I closed my eyes, I heard the words again, for the greater good. They were not the brutal sermons of the ecclesiarchy, filled with blood and fire. They were soft, steady, almost kind. Kindness was alien to me, and because of that, it unsettled me more deeply than cruelty ever could. Could such words truly belong to an enemy? Or was this the very snare that made them so dangerous? The doubts gnawed at me until I could no longer tell where fear ended and hunger began. I moved through the days in a haze, haunted by the promise of something beyond the endless toil. My body obeyed the machines, but my mind had slipped elsewhere, wandering corridors of thought where every path ended in shadow. Sometimes, in the corner of my eye, I thought I saw them, figures draped in pale blue, watching from a distance, their silhouettes vanishing the moment I turned. Perhaps it was only the trick of failing lights, or the games my mind played against itself. But the feeling lingered. I was not alone. Something was guiding me, pushing me toward a destiny I did not choose. By the fifth night, I could bear the silence no longer. I unrolled the parchment again, though I knew every line, every mark by heart. I stared at the words until they blurred before me. I whispered them aloud, voice breaking as if speaking them would give them weight, would make them less unreal. But instead, the sound of my own voice frightened me. In the darkness, even my whisper felt like a confession. I wanted to tear the parchment apart, to scatter it into dust, but my hands refused. Even in doubt, even in fear, I could not destroy the only thing that had ever spoken to me of something greater than this endless, suffocating existence. It was not hope I felt. It was a hunger, sharp and relentless. A hunger to know whether there was truly more beyond the rot and ruin of the Imperium. Still, the doubt did not fade. It deepened, like cracks spreading through the hull of a dying ship. I knew that to follow the message was to risk annihilation. Yet to ignore it was to continue the slow death I had endured every day of my life. Between two dooms, which was worse? As I lay awake, eyes wide in the suffocating dark, a truth settled upon me with crushing weight. There would be no turning back. Whether I obeyed the summons or cast it aside, I had already crossed the threshold. By daring to imagine another path, I had abandoned the safety of obedience. The doubts were no longer questions. They were chains. And with every passing hour, those chains drew me closer to the gates. It did not happen in some grand ceremony, nor with the trumpets of destiny. No, it began with silence. The kind of silence that feels like the world itself is holding its breath. I remember the morning well. The factory had just stirred to life, machines grinding and shrieking like tortured beasts when the overseers came for me. They did not speak. They never needed to. Their eyes, cold and impersonal, were enough. One gesture of a gloved hand, one tilt of the head, and I understood. I was to follow. There was no choice, no plea, no delay. My feet moved before my mind could resist, shuffling forward with the obedience drilled into me since birth. The others watched. They always did when someone was taken. Their faces, blank as masks, revealed nothing. No pity, no curiosity. Only a hollow reflection of my own dread. In this world, to see was to endanger yourself. To care was to invite ruin. So they bent their heads back to their work, hands trembling only slightly, while I was led away. The path through the factory corridors felt longer than ever, every echo of boots on steel reverberating in my skull. I wanted to ask where I was going, but my tongue refused. Words were dangerous things, and in their silence I heard the unspoken answer. It did not matter. Wherever they led me, it would not be back. We passed through the outer gates of the Hab block, gates I had never crossed before. They loomed above me like the ribs of some colossal beast, blackened by centuries of ash and smoke. Beyond them lay the wasteland, a stretch of barren rock scarred by industry and neglect. The air outside tasted sharper, thinner, as though it resented being breathed. And waiting there at the edge of the settlement were the strangers. They did not wear the robes of the ecclesiarchy, nor the armor of the Arbites. They were not imperial. Their garments were cleaner, smoother, woven of fabrics I could not name. Some bore colors of pale blue and white, strange insignia stitched upon their sleeves, circles and symbols that spoke of unity rather than domination. Their faces were human, yes, but not like ours. Their eyes did not carry the weight of despair. They carried something far more dangerous, conviction. I wanted to turn back. My body screamed for it, muscles tightening as if to resist. But the overseers stood behind me, their weapons resting casually in their hands. They would not stop me from leaving, but they would not allow me to return either. I realized with a hollow finality that my choice had been made for me long before this moment. The strangers spoke softly, their words calm, their tone almost soothing. I could not catch all the meaning, but I recognized the phrase that now haunted my every breath: for the greater good. They gestured toward a waiting transport, sleek, clean, alien in its perfection compared to the rusting hulks I had known all my life. Its engines hummed like the purr of some enormous beast, steady and patient. I hesitated at the threshold. Behind me lay the only world I had ever known: filth, labor, and silence. Ahead lay something unknown, a future wrapped in promises and lies. My heart pounded as though trying to break free from my chest. One of the strangers met my gaze. His eyes were calm, unnervingly calm, as if he had already measured the sum of my soul and found it wanting. He extended his hand not with command but with invitation. The gesture was almost kind, and that kindness terrified me more than any cruelty. With trembling steps, I entered the transport. The door sealed behind me with a hiss, severing the last tether to the life I had known. The interior was impossibly clean, metal gleaming under soft lights that did not flicker, did not falter. I sat upon a bench, my hands clutched tightly together while others filed in. Men and women like me, their faces pale with fear, their eyes reflecting the same uncertainty. We did not speak. Words were useless here, drowned beneath the weight of what had been left behind. As the engines stirred, I felt the vibration through the floor, a low hum that grew into a steady roar. The settlement outside began to shrink, its jagged towers of rust and smoke fading into the distance. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass of the viewport, watching the only home I had ever known vanish beneath a shroud of ash. I expected to feel sorrow. Instead, I felt nothing. Emptiness. The life I had lost had never truly been mine. What I felt was something more dangerous, more corrosive. The faintest flicker of anticipation, and beneath it all, the gnawing whisper of doubt. Was I walking toward liberation? Or had I simply been led from one cage into another, its bars painted with the words "greater good"? The transport did not move as Imperial machines moved. There was no violent shudder, no deafening grind of rusted gears forced to life by prayers and incense. It glided, smooth, silent, as though the air itself parted willingly for its passage. The vibration beneath my feet was steady, almost soothing, as if the machine was alive and content with its purpose. That alone unsettled me. For all my years within the Imperium's shadow, I had never trusted machines that did not scream in agony. We passed through the wastelands, the poisoned soil stretching endlessly beneath the pale sky. I had seen this land before, but only through the cracks of the hab-block gates. From within the transport, it looked even more barren, stripped of all but the scars of industry. Towers of slag and broken chimneys rose like the bones of dead titans, reaching toward a heaven that had long since abandoned us. And then, beyond the horizon, I saw it, the facility. It did not belong to the Imperium. Its architecture was too precise, too deliberate. The towers curved upward in clean arcs, their surfaces gleaming in pale shades of white and blue. No soot blackened their edges, no rust ate through their veins. They shone as if untouched by decay, like fragments of a dream left to linger in this corpse world. For a moment, my heart betrayed me. I felt wonder, but wonder in this universe is only another mask of fear. The closer we came, the more alien the world became. Drones floated silently above the landing grounds, their metallic shells reflecting the weak light of the star. They moved with perfect precision, without hesitation, without error. Their round, unblinking eyes followed us, cold and mechanical, yet not without purpose. Unlike the Imperium's servitors, these machines were not broken, not shackled corpses bound by wires and cruelty. They were whole, untouched by madness, and that wholeness disturbed me far more than the grotesque servitors ever had. When the transport settled, the doors hissed open with a grace I had never known. I stepped out onto smooth stone, so clean I could see the reflection of my hollow face upon it. Around me, the others disembarked in silence, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling. We were like animals dragged from the filth of a cage into a place too pure, too ordered, for our existence. The air was different here, lighter, sharper. It filled my lungs with a clarity that felt unnatural, as though every breath carried a hidden command. I coughed, not from smoke or dust, but from the sheer strangeness of breathing something untainted. They awaited us at the edge of the landing ground. The Toe. I had heard the name whispered before. In fragments of rumor passed from one trembling mouth to another. Aliens, invaders, prophets of the greater good. Yet nothing had prepared me for the sight of them. Their forms were not monstrous, not grotesque as the tales of Xenos had promised. They were tall, slender, their skin a shade of blue that shimmered faintly beneath the light. Their eyes were dark, steady, filled not with cruelty but with an unyielding calm. That calm was more terrifying than rage. They did not carry chains nor weapons raised in threat. They carried only presence, the unspoken certainty that we were already theirs. Their voices, when they spoke, rolled across the landing ground with unnerving clarity. The words were foreign, yet softened by translators until I could hear their promise. You are safe now. You have been chosen for the greater good. The phrase struck like a hammer against my chest. I had heard it in whispers, in dreams, in the phantom messages burned into factory walls. And now, here it was, spoken openly without fear by the very beings who had planted it within me. Safe. The word felt hollow, brittle. In the Imperium, there was no safety, only endurance. To hear it spoken so easily, so casually, was like hearing a child's lullaby sung over the roar of a battlefield. Part of me wanted to believe. Part of me recoiled, knowing such comfort could only hide something far worse. We were led forward in silence. The facility loomed above us, its gates parting without sound, revealing corridors of white stone and pale light. The walls were lined with strange inscriptions, smooth symbols that curved like rivers, instead of the jagged marks of Imperial Gothic. Their meaning was hidden from me, yet their intent was clear. This was not my world. I was an intruder, tolerated only because they willed it. The further we walked, the more I felt the weight of it, the sense that I was stepping across a threshold, leaving behind the broken corpse of the Imperium and entering something new, something alien. It was not freedom, no. Freedom does not exist in the grim darkness of the far future. But it was change, and change, in a life where every day had been the same, was a kind of heresy. My doubts returned, gnawing at the edges of wonder. Could this truly be salvation? Or was it simply another form of control, more subtle, more complete? The Imperium had ruled through fear, through pain, through endless labor. The Toe ruled through order, through calm, through the illusion of choice. Which was the crueler cage? As I followed the others deeper into the heart of this strange place, I felt the last traces of my old life fading. The rust, the soot, the choking air, all of it seemed like a half-remembered nightmare. Yet in its place came something colder, the certainty that I no longer belonged to myself. I had crossed the gateway, and there would be no return.